Welcome to Travel Tales, a mini-series within Distress to Joyful Bailey's Way podcast. I'm your host, Bailey Raber, here to travel the world with you. In each episode, you'll hear firsthand how my travel experiences have gone, both within the United States and abroad. Together, we'll discover new cultures, learn about a variety of new places for you to go out and explore, bring light to how I navigate my bipolar disorder while traveling, and, most importantly, we'll have fun. You'll leave each episode stocked full of exciting new ideas, interesting information, and feeling like it's time to hop on a plane. So come on, friends, let's start exploring. Hello, friends. Some of you guys are super excited about this episode, and you've been waiting for this to begin. And here it is. Today on Travel Tales, we are going to India. Oh, I'm so excited. So I don't have anything I'm specifically going to show in terms of like souvenirs or postcards. So for those of you guys on YouTube, sorry. But I do have this Indian flag, which I did purchase here in the United States. But before going to India, I used this flag in a cute little reel where I was speaking in Hindi. And so, yeah, this is from that little cup of flags here. Actually, I'll show that on YouTube. But in the last Travel Tales, I mentioned a cup of flags right here. And here it is. And the India one belongs in it, too. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. And so actually before I start, reading and talking about part one of day one, I'm going to kind of go over how this trip occurred and why. So why am I going to India? For those of you who have been tuning in, you already know about my fiancé. For those of you who you're joining for the first time, let me make a little sense for you. My fiancé and I, Monish, we've been together for almost 3.5 years now. And in 2022, we were finally able to go to India together. And India is significant because Moni is from India. He came to the United States back in 2017 and did school and moved to Houston and then found me. And, that's our love story. But his family, his immediate family, also lives in India. Granted, he does have some cousins who live throughout the United States, and he's got family who live in other countries besides India, but his family of origin, meaning his parents and his sister, they still live in India. So it was a really big deal for me to get to go over there with him so I could meet his parents, because we started dating right before the pandemic happened, which means everything shut down, and we lived together for, we were dating more than 2 years before I finally met his parents. Yeah, wrap your head around that, guys. We were dating for over 2 years before I met his parents in person. Now, we did meet on FaceTime and all of that, and we do have a weekly FaceTime call nowadays. But this was a really big deal. And going to India especially from Houston, Texas, it's a pretty far travel, if you can imagine. It's over 8,000 miles, and it's a lot of airplane sitting. So the first flight was, it was 14 and a half hours, and that was from Houston into Doha, Qatar. We landed in Qatar this first time around. You can also go through Dubai. You can go through Abu Dhabi. Sometimes you can go through Europe too, but we have found it's cheaper usually to go through the Middle East. I didn't know that Qatar existed until we booked these flights. I didn't know what Qatar was. I didn't know anything about it. And then, funny thing, here at the end of 2022, that's when the FIFA World Cup was happening in Qatar, and everybody was like freaking out about it. So that was interesting. Some of you guys might not even know about Qatar. Look it up. It's just a little country in the Middle East. There's probably a lot more to it than what I know, but I didn't even leave the airport when we went there, so I really don't know shit except for the FIFA World Cup was there. So then from Doha, Qatar, we had another 3-hour flight to get to Mumbai. And boom, that is where this story begins. So we landed at the Mumbai airport at 2:30 a.m., By this time, we had spent about 18 hours total in flight, which I actually just listed out to you guys, so whoops, got ahead of myself. Both myself and my partner Monish were incredibly exhausted, hungry, and smelly. Apparently, apparently I sweated a lot on the flights and roaming around through the airports. Oh God, y'all. Let me just stop right there and tell you that if you're gonna fly through the Middle East, be prepared to be fucking hot. Take extra clothes with you to change into. If you can get into one of the, what are they called? The clubs? Ooh, lounges. If you can get into a lounge, a lot of them have showers, which is really cool. But I was sweating like fucking crazy because these airports aren't fucking centralized AC like in the United States. And after sitting on a 14.5 hour flight and then walking through a hot ass airport, it was a lot for me. So I did. I sweated a lot, and I'm not afraid to admit it. And I'm also not afraid to fucking warn you too. So we made our way to customs for me to fill out an immigration form before we separated into our different lines. Monish went to the line for Indian passport holders, and I made my way over to foreign passport holders. Surprisingly, the jam-packed Indian passport line took less time for Monish to go through than it took for me to get through my foreign passport line, which was significantly shorter. Although this probably shouldn't have been a shock, as the U.S. Customs line always moves much faster than the foreign passport line back home. As I was standing alone in my line, waiting to gain entry into the country, I began to wonder what people were thinking of me. The ambush of stares from curious eyes began as soon as we reached Doha, and I knew they would continue throughout the duration of my time in India. I'm already used to being stared at, as I am often finding people in Houston pointing their eyes in my direction, but Monish prepared me for the enormous increase that would arise as soon as I entered his motherland. The foreign passport line consisted mainly of Indians and Middle Eastern people, so I began to make up stories as to what they were thinking about this lonely white girl entering wondrous India all on her own. I continued to make up stories like these in my head, or verbally tell them to Monish and the family throughout the trip as a form of entertainment. I'll talk more about this later. Oh God, yeah, so I'm reading from my post that is titled India Trip Day 1 Part 1, Arrival, March 14th, 2022. This is actually from my travel journal. So guys, what I do is when I go on trips, I write everything in my travel journal. I come home, I make a blog post about it, then I sit down and I read it to you and I tell you, because when I tell you here where you're listening, one, you get all of my expressions, my humor, my personality. You get all of that better than you do just reading it. But also, when I go through and I read these to y'all, I remember things and I can tell you little side stories that just don't make sense in a fucking blog post. And also, I'm sure a lot of you would rather hear me talk about this than read the post anyways. And no offense taken, friend, I totally get you and I understand. Oh, but yeah, I made up so many stories. It was a way to stay entertained because I'm standing in this line, you guys, waiting to go through customs. I didn't have service. There wasn't Wi-Fi that I could connect to. I couldn't be on my phone. So I was literally bored out of my fucking mind because I'm by myself. I'm not talking to these people. Nobody's talking to me because, you know, I don't know. It just didn't seem like I'm just not going to make small talk with a stranger at fucking 3 a.m. after flying for 18 hours in total. Like, leave me alone. But I'm bored, so my mind starts wandering, and people were staring at me, so I started making up in my head what they were thinking. Like, for example, somebody was thinking that this girl came here by herself for work, and she's confused and she's lost, or something. But I wrote more of these down in my journal later, so you're just going to have to stay tuned for more episodes to hear them all. But let me get back to the story. So finally, it was my turn to approach the guy at the counter who would review my documents, stamp my passport, and allow me to gain entry into this vast and beautiful country. While I've been studying the Hindi language for almost 2 years now and was beyond excited to exercise my knowledge with the people of India, I chose to refrain from practicing with this man who got to decide if I could enter his country or not. By this time, it was a little after 3 a.m., and he did not appear to be in a good mood, nor enjoy having to handle the foreigner's line. Y'all, this man looked fucking cranky as shit. He did not want to be bothered. He was irritated that he was there. And another thing that's so crazy that I didn't mention in here is that even if you're standing in line, let's say you're standing in line and you're next in line, and the person who's behind the counter decides to get up for a pee break, they will literally get up and leave. And now their booth is empty, and even though you're next in line, sorry, go find one of the other shorter lines because it's too bad, nobody's here. Seriously, I've never seen that anywhere before, where the fucking person just leaves without warning and nobody comes and like takes his spot and keeps the line going. No, he just fucking disappears and you're like, what just happened? That happened. I saw it both times when I went to India. So yeah, be prepared if you go to India and you're standing in the line, the person leaves, be ready to dart into another one real fucking quick. After receiving my stamping, I found Monish and we made our way to baggage claim. Already, I was seeing so many differences than what I was used to in the United States. Once you retrieve your bags, you're required to stand in line and have them screened again before you may exit the airport. I found this odd because back home, our bags are screened in between landing and retrieving them at the baggage claim. I later found out that this process of standing in line for the screening is only for international flights. Thankfully, we weren't required to do this when we traveled by flight to Delhi, India, in a few days later. Yeah, so hint, hint. I am going to go a lot of places in India this first time. So guys, get excited. I'm excited to tell you about this. I super am. Once we exited the airport, we immediately saw Tanvi, Monish's sister, and Jigar, Tanvi's husband. The smells of India instantly hit me. They were familiar smells, but I couldn't pin as to why this was as my The smells of India instantly hit me. They were familiar smells, but I couldn't pin why, as this was my first time entering the country. Maybe I've smelled these smells in an Indian household in the US before, or maybe in one of the Indian stores or restaurants that we frequent in Houston. I'm not sure, but I do know that my excitement began to steadily increase from this moment on. We made our way to the taxi/Uber/Ola pickup area and awaited the arrival of our cars. They don't have Lyft in this country, but instead they have their own rideshare app called Ola. Though don't ask me how to use it as I was just along for the ride. We had to order 2 cars as there were 4 people and 4 big suitcases, and it's not easy to book a large vehicle in India via Uber at 4 a.m. When you think of Mumbai, think of it as the New York City of India. A massive city, lots of people everywhere, noises throughout the night, and a great public transportation system, meaning that you don't need your own vehicle just as you don't need to own one in New York City. I'm going to add something to that too, guys. It's more like a cross between New York City and LA because Mumbai is where Bollywood is. So if you're not familiar with Bollywood, first of all, you should go watch Queen. That's one of my favorite Bollywood movies, and it's on Netflix, and it's so fucking good. Turn on the subtitles in English, and you can watch it, and it's amazing. But Bollywood is the Hollywood of India. So the whole film industry, all of that is located in Mumbai. So Mumbai is super unique, and I love it because, like I said, it's a cross between New York City and LA. You have Hollywood there, but it's the feel of New York with rushing around, large buildings everywhere, people everywhere. You can get public transportation so easy, and then some. So, yeah. That I wanted to toss in because for some reason I left that out in this blog post, but lucky you, you're sitting here listening to me, giving you more information. Woohoo, go you! Tanvi and I hopped into the first of the 2 cars that arrived, and I told Monish to ride with Jigger as he and Tenby were the ones who booked these cars on their phones. It was about a 15 to 20-minute drive to their side of town as traffic was minimal due to the early hour that it was. During the ride, Tenby and I talked the whole time, beginning to really get to know one another as this was our first time meeting in person. A little background. Moni and I began dating in January 2020, right before the global pandemic lockdown occurred. Which I already stated, but I'm also reading my blog post, so bear with me. Due to the COVID-19 and issues with scheduling appointments for updating Monish's U.S. visa, we hadn't had the chance to meet his family, who all reside in India, until now, over 2 years after we began dating. For those of you on YouTube, I am so sorry. We just came back from eating dinner about 20 minutes ago, and that is obviously showing. So I apologize. It's really gross, but it is what it is, and I'm not cutting this out. So this is raw footage. It's always raw. You get all the bloopers on YouTube. Okay, back to the story. Of course, I'd originally met everyone virtually via WhatsApp calls back in 2020. We all began forming relationships back then and have been staying in touch digitally, though nothing beats getting to know someone in person. And I do agree with that fully. I stand by that 100% to this day. I prefer to get to know somebody in person. It is the best way to get to know somebody. My first car ride in India was rather smooth, and I was thankful for this, as Monish had previously spent numerous hours preparing me for the shock of the chaotic driving that occurs all throughout India. I have severe PTSD from many car wrecks that I was in during my younger years, so his preparation was much needed. But due to the minimal traffic at 4:30 a.m., I hardly got a taste of what to expect when riding in a vehicle in this country and what I was soon to be in for. ... I stared out the window in complete awe and wonder as we made our way to Tenby and Jigger's apartment. There was so much to look at. This place looks nothing like back home, and my desire to see and know more began to intensify rapidly. Y'all, I remember, I'm never going to forget this trip. I never will. It's our first trip there together, and it was just so meaningful and so beautiful and so impactful. And I remember sitting in the Uber and just looking outside and just staring at everything, and it felt like I was in a Bollywood movie. I'd seen so many Bollywood movies by this point that I was used to seeing random like stock shots of Mumbai and everything, or people riding on the motorcycles or in the cars through Mumbai. And that's what it felt like. I was like, oh my God, this is it. Like, I'm on a Bollywood movie set right now. What the fuck? But it was, God. I'm so curious. I love museums. I love window shopping. I love looking at shit. And there's a lot of shit to look at in India. There's stuff everywhere, among every little inch, around every corner. There's always something to see. And it's really fucking cool because you see things in places that you wouldn't expect. Like you see houses, temple, houses, shop, houses, chai stand, paniwala, houses, like buildings, shopping mall, houses. It's so crazy. It's so crazy, but like in an awesome way. And for those of you who had never been to India before and are curious about traveling there, one thing I do need to warn you about is India is sensory overload to the max. To the max. So there are so many sights and smells and sounds and everything going on all at once. People crowded together, just all of that. And what Moni and I have kind of, we've decided on our own that people either love India or they hate it, because either they love it because it's, wow, look at this, and there's just always something new, or they hate it because it's too much and it's too sensory overloading for them. So if you struggle with sensory overload on a regular basis, you may want to rethink a trip to India or do some more research or just keep that in mind. But interesting enough, we were at dinner this evening and we were talking with, I think it was the manager. He came by and did the table check. And he asked what the occasion was. And we were celebrating our engagement together finally at this nice sushi restaurant here in Houston with vegetarian sushi, by the way. Let me make that clear. And so we were talking about India. And the guy said that he's always wanted to go and that he's heard that it's just can be very overwhelming and very intense for people. And he goes, well, I don't mind that. I mean, working in restaurants is pretty intense, so we're used to it. And he chuckled. And I said, you know what? I was a restaurant server for 8 years, so I feel you. That must be why I was totally fine with it. Because think about it. If you've ever worked in a restaurant before, it's chaos. There is loud noises. There's lots of smells. There's people everywhere. You're having to run to the table and have your customer service voice on and be as polite as possible. And then run to the kitchen and fucking scream at somebody that you are 911ing this because they forgot to make it or it came out wrong or what the fuck ever. It's a lot. It's intense. So if you are a server at a restaurant or you work in a restaurant in general, you could probably handle India no fucking problem. Just saying. All right, back to the story. So, since my intent... All right, back to the story. So, since my and Tanvi's Uber arrived at their apartment first, Tanvi was able to give me a tour of the apartment before the boys arrived. Again, everything looks so different than what I'm used to back home. The keys to the apartment are filled with little holes versus how back home the keys have incisions cut to fit the wands of a particular lock. Wands cut to fit the wards of a particular lock. Damn, I must have Googled that. I must have Googled that when I was writing this for the blog because I don't know what a ward is of a lock. I'm sorry, guys, but I'm sure it's linked on the blog post. I'm reading it, but I printed it out. But that was very interesting because if you think about a key, you know how it's got like those jagged edges? The keys over there, it's smooth. It's all smooth like this. And then there's just holes poked in it, which I thought was super fucking interesting because I have no idea how that would work on the inside. It's very intricate. But also, I guess it would be harder to pick a lock maybe like that. Maybe it's more of a safety thing. I don't know. But that was one of the first things I noticed and was super fascinated about. Another thing I noticed is that their light switches are, quote, backwards over there. So you flip them up to turn them on and you flip them down to turn them off. Which I never got used to, y'all. Not on this trip, I should say. I didn't get used to it on this trip. When I went back in December of 2022, I was used to it by the end of that trip. But yeah. That was wild. Can you imagine every time you are walking into a room and you need the lights and you flip it up and it's already flipped up? It's like, oh shit, you gotta flip it down to turn it on. Like, very, very confusing. And also, every room has a ton of light switches all next to each other. So you have to click them all to figure out which one is which if you don't live there and you're not used to it, mind you. So I would walk into a room and there'd be like 7 light switches all next to each other. And I'm flipping every single one of them until I can figure out to get which light I need on. And some of those light switches are for the fan. Some of them are for the electrical outlet next to it. Like, it's wild. It's totally different than the US. But again, it's just one of those little things that I noticed. I'm very detail oriented. I'm curious. I notice things. And that's why this really stood out to me. And I was like, wow, okay, this is different. Another thing that's different is that centralized AC is reserved for the 1% of the wealthy here in India. So they had 3 different AC units that were hung high above windows in different areas of the apartment. One was in Tanvi and Jigger's room, one was in the guest room where Monish and I stayed, and one was in the living room. They also have fans, which I just previously mentioned, which all have a rotating knob next to its switch as the way to control its speed. Not a hanging cord in sight like what we see in the US. So you guys might have seen, because we used to have these at my parents' house growing up and at my grandparents' house. There would be a box on the wall, and you turn the dial, and that's going to change the speed of the ceiling fan. Those I don't think are, I mean, I could be wrong. I haven't been in a modernized, updated house in a long time, but I don't think that those are very common in the US anymore. I haven't seen them in a very, very, very long time. But all of the fans in India, you hit the switch. Goodness, I should have put water next to me. But all of the fans in India, you hit the switch on the wall, so like the light switch, and then you turn the dial to turn it whatever setting you want. That was super different, and that was a lot easier to get used to, but it's again one of those little things that I just happen to notice. As I mentioned earlier, I was feeling sweaty and kind of yuck after the long hours of travel, so I immediately asked to take a shower. I learned very quickly that this would be a much different experience than what I'm used to. First of all, they don't use shower curtains in India. This concerned me as I tend to make messes everywhere that I go, and holy fuck, I make messes everywhere, y'all. I get food on my clothes on a regular basis. I spill shit. I knock things over. I'm just, I'm not gentle. I'm not graceful. I'm not. So Tumby assured me that it would be okay as they have a squeegee for me to use to push the excess water towards the drain. I'm no stranger to hard work, so this added step to my shower didn't faze me. And for those wondering, this is for a household shower. Hotel showers in India don't require this type of method, and they're very similar to the showers found in hotels in the US. So if you're going and staying at somebody's home, just know that squeegeeing the shower is a thing. And it's basically you're just pulling the water to the drain because it'll pool in certain areas. Now, what I didn't mention here, sure, there's no shower curtain, but there is a little like ledge like this if you're on YouTube, like think of like a curb or yeah, like I guess like a curb. So it's kind of like built up but it's tiled. So that kind of like keeps the water in for the most part, and sometimes it gets out a little bit where like the sink and everything is, but there's another drain over there to squeegee that shit away. It's fine. This would be very shocking to some people. And I understand that because I used to be a diva. Like, there would have been a time in my life where this would have freaked me out and I would have said, no, 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 I'm not doing that. But I have grown so much as a person, and to me, it's just fucking, just do it. Who cares? Yeah, I don't have to squeegee my shower hair at home, but I'm in somebody's home in India. I'm staying there for free. They are taking wonderful care of me. If I have to squeegee a fucking shower for that, that's going to take a minute of my time. Fine, I'll do it. But like I said, I do know that this is not something that is comfortable for everybody. And so, if you get invited to stay in someone's home in India, be prepared for it. Because the maid's going to come clean tomorrow, but the maid isn't going to come clean up after you right after you take a shower, because that's not how this works. Ooh, another thing. So Tunfi and Jigger, they had the option for hot water in their apartment. And in order to get the water hot, you would have to, once again, flip a switch and allow it time to heat up before you could take a hot shower because it had to heat up. So this is actually a luxury, you guys. Not everybody in India has that. And I assured them that a cold shower would be perfect as I did not need to add any more heat to my already boiling body temperature. It was nicer when it was cold outside in December. It wasn't really that cold. But for the most part, not everybody has that. And they don't have bathtubs either. So in most homes in India, you're going to just find the shower like I talked about, especially if they're in an apartment, it seems. But Moni was telling me that growing up, bathtubs, that was not at all a thing. The neighbor across the street had a bathtub, and that was a luxury. And they would go over there sometimes when they were kids and take baths because they didn't get to do that in their house. All they had was a shower. So that's another luxury that we have in the United States, that most of us have bathtubs. We don't have to squeegee shit. You guys should be feeling really fucking grateful for your houses right now. So Tunvi prepared some Maggi noodles for everybody to snack on before we all tried to get some sleep. So Maggi is basically India's version of American ramen noodles, but 1,000 times better. They use a spice blend called Maggi. They use a spice blend called Maggi Magic Masala, which is an explosion of rich flavors that's sure to satisfy any lover of spicy foods. Y'all, I'm obsessed with this. We have packets of Maggi Magic Masala Spice. We've got probably like 70 packets because all the packets are like this big. But we've got like 70 packets in our pantry right now, and I'm not even fucking kidding. Because we bought, I think, 120 of them when we were in India last. They're 10 cents each in the United States. They're basically a penny when you buy them in India. And we bought a shit ton, and I brought them home because I fucking love this stuff. It's so good. And the spice isn't just for these like ramen noodles, the Maggi ramen noodles. I put that shit on everything. I really do. My eggs, my fucking tacos, my popcorn. I put it on everything, y'all. It's fucking amazing. So, being the curious cat that I am, I began to wander around their apartment and notice the differences between Tunbi and Jigger's home in India and our home back in the US. Their fridge was a lot smaller as they have fresh food each Their fridge was a lot smaller as they have fresh food each day prepared by their maid. Their countertops are lower, but they have tons of storage above. The stove is a bit smaller and it has 3 burners that are all side by side, which is different than, 1, 2, 3, 4 that we have here in the US. But their stoves, guys, were also all gas, and you turn on the gas and then you have to light it. You have to you have this little thing and then you just light it. That's how they do it there. It's not an automatic gas stove and it's not an automatic electric stove. It's a little bit different. And you also have to have the propane for it, I believe. Propane, whatever it is. The gas. You have to refill that too. So that all was interesting because this is, again, it's just different. There's nothing wrong with it. Y'all, there is nothing wrong with any of this shit that I've pointed out that's different in India than the US. It's literally just different. It's just a different way of living. And, I'm going a little bit off track here, but I want to point out that that is why it is so important for you to travel the world and see other people's countries. See how other people live. Because when you go and you see how other people live and you see how they have to do a couple extra things to get one thing done that we do here in the US, like turning on the fucking stove. They have to turn it on and they have to light it and then they have to, adjust the knob so it's not too much flame. That's a little bit more complicated than the fucking turn on the stove to the exact number that you want here in the US. This, again, says nothing about their country, but it says everything about how convenient we have things here in the US. How easy life is for us. Life is not easy for anybody, but life is a lot easier sometimes in comparison over here than it is over there because we've got conveniences out the ass here in America, guys. Out the ass. And I'm really throwing this in your face right now because I know I have gone through periods where I was, upset or ungrateful about things. But now that I've been to a couple different countries in a short amount of time and I've seen how convenient things are for us here, it's really hard for me to be so upset about something so small over here. It really is because I'm so much more grateful for these things that I have that previously I didn't think were a big deal. But when you think about it and you see that other people don't have this and you have this, you see, wow, this is a big deal. This is awesome. I'm so grateful that it's so easy for me to take a shower here and there's no extra work involved and that I always have hot water and yada, yada, yada. Whereas those in India don't always have that. Or those in another country might not always have that. And so it opens your eyes also to understanding how other people work and how other cultures work. And it just helps you be more compassionate to other people around you. It really does. I'm going to get off my soapbox right now because that was a huge deviant. This is more so, I guess, the what I learned part that came in a little early. Whoops. But let's go back. Let's continue this trip. We're almost done. Unfortunately, we're almost done with this day. You'll have to wait 2 weeks for the next one to come out, but it'll be worth the wait. I promise you. Oh, so then I went on to say that all of these observations began to make more sense to me throughout my time in India as I learned more about their way of life. Boom! Okay, so I was on topic. I don't feel so bad now. So Monish and I stayed up a little later than Tanvi and Jigger, but after a while we decided to get at least 3 to 4 hours of sleep to help with the jet lag that would smack us in the face the next day. The next day, as in like that same day, because it was about 5 a.m. at this point. As we turned on the guest room AC and began to settle into bed, I learned that they don't use blankets during the warmer months, but instead they use a fairly thin shawl. This is because it's typically very hot and no one wants to sweat underneath heavy blankets. Although the AC combined with the fan was more than enough to keep us cool throughout the night. The beds in Indian households are much firmer than those of the US, which is something that Monish had been preparing me for long before this trip was booked. Oh God, y'all. He's so amazing. Because we had a little over 2 years of togetherness before we went on this trip, he knows that sometimes surprises aren't so great for me and that it's a lot easier to warn me of things that might catch me off guard or might trigger me. And so he's been preparing me for 2 years for us to go to India, telling me all the things, making sure I understood to watch out for cow shit when you're walking down the street because you might accidentally step in it. He's done it before. Or that the beds are more and that the beds are more firm and that there's not going to be hot water at his parents' house and all these things. And so he's really been the best. Like, there's no better way to travel to a country that is so vastly different from your own than with your own personal guide, especially if they're also the love of your life. So, to my surprise, I found these beds very comfortable. As I began to doze off, listening to the sounds from the street below, cars and scooters honking, people yelling, cows mooing, all the things in the city. I was so grateful to finally be in the country where Monish grew up and was already ready to wake up and begin exploring. Boom! The end of day one. Guys, this story series, because this is 14 days, 14 whole days. So you're going to have 14 episodes of me talking about India. I hope you don't get bored of India, but I mean, sorry, not sorry, because this was such a magical trip. You guys have no idea. This was just the first part of the first day. All of this happened before we woke up I think we woke up at 9 a.m. Again, this is a little, what is it, prequel teaser to next Travel Tales episode. But we woke up at like 9 a.m. the next day and then had a full first day in India after flying like this. So the magic has barely begun. You guys have no idea what you're in for. I'm going to give a little bit of a hint. And if you've read any of these blog posts of mine, then you already have a little bit of a hint too. We went to Delhi. We went to the Taj Mahal in Agra. We went to Monish's hometown, which was so, so amazing for me to get to go see, as he's the love of my life. I want to know where he came from and where he went to school and where he grew up and where he hung out. We went to his cousin's wedding, which was at the palace in his hometown. This wedding lasted 4 days, you guys. There's so much magic, and we haven't even scratched the surface, and I cannot wait. I cannot wait to recount all of this to you. Guys, I really hope that you're as excited as I am, because when I recount these stories to you, I remember more and more, and then, it's just a level of nostalgia, and I'm so glad that I get to share it with you. And I hope that this inspires you to learn about a different country, to find a country that maybe one of your friends is from, and sit down and start to learn more about their culture and where they're from, and maybe travel there with them one day. I don't know. I really hope, though, to inspire you guys to travel the world and to get out of your comfort zone and to see how other people live. to see how other people do things. Because I am telling you, it will change your life for the better. You're going to come back just feeling so different and so full and just so, I don't even know how to explain it. But I know when I came home from this trip, you guys, I just was in disbelief. I was like, wow, this felt like a dream. And just wait, because when I start telling you more, you're going to be like, damn, that does sound like a dream. Like, what? I'm so jealous. I don't want you to be jealous, but a lot of people have said that. Don't be jealous. Just be happy for me and hope that you can also experience the same thing too. All right, but until next time, y'all, take it easy, stay grateful, and be joyful. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Travel Tales. Head on over to whatisheybellsdoing.com/travel to find the resources mentioned in today's episode. You can watch this episode for free on YouTube, complete with a bonus slideshow of photos and videos from this trip. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating on your favorite listening platform or write a review on Apple Podcasts. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on new episode releases. See you next time for another great adventure. Bye!